Welcome back to Trad Reviews Live, everybody. We've had a little bit of a hiatus.
Hi,
Alexander and
everyone.
I were off somewhere, that somewhere being the heart of Christendom in Rome. And maybe we'll do a review of Rome sometime in the future, Alexander.
Yeah, we can give it a little bit of a rating, a little bit of a review.
Suffice to say, we think highly of it. But today we're going to talk about Song of Bernadette. So I had that reaction to Alexander when we watched the 1960s version of Man for All Seasons, and I said, "You
Hmm.
haven't seen Man for All Seasons?" And so
Yeah,
Alexander, I think, had that similar reaction. You haven't seen Song of Bernadette?
indeed, indeed.
And I have to say, I'm shocked. Now having seen it, it's a very fine film.
Hmm.
I don't know how we missed it as a family, as a Catholic family growing up, and I don't know how I missed it as a traditional Catholic for the last 20 something years.
Yeah,
But that has been mended.
yeah, it's good to see.
So I guess why don't we start with you, because you've seen the movie before and
Hmm.
it's probably had a longer impression. I just finished it today, so it's very fresh in my mind, and I
Yeah,
have notes I want to talk about, but I thought maybe start
yeah,
with you.
yeah. It's interesting because we've in the past we've talked a little bit about personally how there's a certain time and a certain time for books, let's say, and as you grow in life, books have a different impact on you. And so, watching this film again, it struck me in a different way than it had in the past. One of the critiques I had previously was that I felt Saint Bernadette was portrayed as a little bit too naive. Not even naive. Just I my previous recollection was that she was portrayed rather. mm, really like a simpleton as opposed to an uneducated girl. And watching it again, I didn't have that same impression. I really liked Jennifer Jones' portrayal of her in this film, and it struck me in a different way this time. And
How
I
long
really,
ago did was it the first time you watched it?
boy, I'm probably at least 15 years ago was the first
Yeah,
time I'd have
yeah.
seen
So
it. So
you're a slightly different
yeah,
person than 15 years ago.
yeah. And especially having been last year we went to France, we went to Lourdes, and seeing some of the things I didn't notice the first time because we were in her house. So when the scene opens up and you see everyone crammed together, I mean that's how it was. It was you feel the poverty when you're there, and it is portrayed well in the film. And as far as the film as an overall, I believe it had 11 Academy Award nominations. It won four of them. Jennifer Jones won Best Actress, and this is the film that really launched her career. So it's historically, it's also a very important film in the film world. So I'm curious of your takes. What were your initial impressions?
Yeah, when I did a little bit of research on to Jennifer Jones, so that was her stage name. Phyllis Isley was her, I think,
Hmm.
given name. That she won the Academy Award for this, and my brain was grappling with the idea that this was a film that won an Academy Award,
Hmm.
and that someone playing Saint Bernadette would have won an Academy Award, given the sort of disgusting nature of many of the films today and the sort
Hmm.
of things that people are given awards for. That there was a time in which Catholics were such an important part of the culture that you could call them amusements or pastimes or films would necessarily break into the so-called cultural mainstream
Yeah.
because they occupied the cultural mainstream. As you say, we have gone to the Subaru family home, and just humbling to think about, where we stayed. We just stayed up the street from her
Yeah.
when we were there in Lourdes. And I have also been to her body in Nevers, which is not very far from Paris, but it was still too far for us to go when we were in Paris.
Mm-hmm.
But I was very shocked because I one time we're both part of a Telegram group, and somebody had shared a picture of her in the Telegram group, and I messaged the person privately and I said, Saint Bernadette specifically requested that there be no photograph taken of her. And he says, "Well, I saw other people taking the photo." I said, "The other people can take photos all they want. You're this is an example of you specifically contradicting the request of a saint."
Yeah.
So, and he I think very uh, kindly took it down. But there's an example of there are saints who don't have a problem with that. So we took photos of Saint Therese. We were in Assisi last weekend. We took pictures of Saint Saint Clare's tomb. But if the saint specifically requests that, and she's requesting it in part because she knew of the notoriety that
Hmm.
followed her, and we saw that in the film. So just reminding my fellow Christians, if it says the saint requests not to take photos, it doesn't matter that everyone else is taking photos. You are responsible for disobeying a saint's own personal request. Obviously, I don't know that it's a sin, but it's certainly discourteous to the saint's
Hmm.
own request. So if you're in Nevers and you have a chance to visit Saint Bernadette, pray, but please don't take photos.
Indeed.
Um, there's so much to like about this film. I don't even know if we're going to be able to cover all of it, but why don't we start at the beginning? You noted the poverty in the family home, and I appreciated that. But notice that none of them looked unhappy. You know, they're all
Yeah.
sleeping, sharing beds, and they don't have a lot of money, but they're cheerful. I Some mischief. I think it was trying to indicate that the Subaru family home had a piety about it, but there was mischievousness as you would have in any home. But the
Hmm.
parents are there making the corrections necessary. They're there at a Christian school, and Saint Bernadette saying, "I don't know about the Trinity. I don't
Yeah.
understand the Trinity." That isn't supposed to be a justification. So a lot of times people will say, "Oh, well, Saint John Vianney, he didn't know Latin, so knowing Latin isn't important." What matters is we get priests out there on the front lines these days. This is not only a stupid argument, but it is condemned. So Pius XI specifically condemned people who would use Saint John Vianney as an example for not knowing your Latin or not being learned enough as a priest.
Mm.
It is a serious charge to be a priest or a nun, and it isn't just whatever, whatever. As much as
Yeah.
people would like to say
Yeah.
that piety covers over everything. There, the priest is, in a sense, a doctor, and he has to do certain things. And if he doesn't say the right words, the sacrament is not affected.
Hmm.
If people don't remember
Yeah.
that, that's in your catechism.
Yeah.
So the idea that you could not be able to sight read Latin and not be defective as a priest, that's something people need to watch out for. If your priest cannot sight read Latin, there is at least a certain question about blessings or even sacraments. If someone has just been trained to pronounce Latin, there's a real danger as to the validity of the works that they do. I'm
Yeah.
not saying that they couldn't love our Lord and not have the best of intentions, but the best of intentions doesn't matter if you don't know what you're saying.
Yeah, well, I mean,
So,
and it goes back. I mean, this is slightly different topic, but the idea of the armchair theologian. You go on social media, you come across, Our Lady 65, and he's read 5 books, and he's out there just debating with Bishop Sanborn or Bishop or Father Disposito, acting as if he's an authority on an equal level. And I mean, you can't do that either. You're reading a couple books online, being versed in a couple topics is nowhere near similar as a seminary formation. So that's another reminder for the laity to not act as experts and always be respectful of the clergy because they know better than you. Validly trained, well-educated clergy. We're not talking about cucarachas here, right? So,
right. And St. Bernadette displays that respect all the time. So we see the proper etiquette. If people don't know, when a priest enters the room, you stand up. It doesn't
hmm
matter what you're doing. It doesn't matter what the conversation you're having is. It's not just for kids in school. If you're
hmm
sitting down and a priest enters the room, you stand up. And I know, don't feel bad if you didn't know that before today. We all had to learn ourselves at a certain stage. I think I was probably taught in 5th grade or something like that, but I didn't know before then.
hmm
So Saint Bernadette saying she doesn't understand the Trinity is not an excuse for you not to study it. In fact, I always say the one job, if you say you have one job, the one job of laity is to study the catechism.
Yeah.
And when you're done with the catechism, pick up another one and make that your life's work. You're never going to know everything about the faith. You're always going to be discovering new things. And that deference to the clergy, to the religious, you can see Saint Bernadette and her family do that, even though early on in the film, that nun and the dean of Lords are very rough on her. She
They are.
defers instead of what we see on social media where people talk back to clergy as if they're equals. People
Hmm.
who can't read Latin are arguing with people who are fluent, who can sight read in Latin,
Hmm.
as if theology is conducted in English, when the majority of the theology that matters in the church is in Latin. And if you can't sight read it, then who are you? You're just
Yeah.
reading off of something that Grok told you about. So I think that there's insufficient clericalism. This is a consistent theme that you might hear from Alexander and myself, but there is insufficient clericalism among today's traditional laity, but we'll save that maybe for another time. I also found it interesting. I'm thinking about Juan Diego in particular, Alexander, because he
Mhm.
knew instinctively that that was Our Lady.
Mhm.
But here she keeps referring to the lady. And I suppose there's a certain humility there that St. Bernadette is not thinking, oh, I'm definitely talking with Our Lady. As
Mhm.
opposed to it could have been St. Catherine. It could have been, remember, St. Joan of Arc had numerous other female saints meeting her. So
Yeah.
she couldn't be sure. What I found was strange. I hadn't heard this before, but the priest was stuck on the grammar saying, well, someone can't say that they're the Immaculate Conception. That's like them saying that
Yeah.
they're their birth. And
Yeah.
I suppose that may have been a stumbling block for some clergy. I don't think they would have invented something for Hollywood. That must have been a real objection from some people
Mhm.
that was being brought forth, the grammar of that. How can you say you are the Immaculate Conception? It's like, well, there is only one. So you could easily say that. And I'm saying that it's so easy for us to say that in hindsight, Alexander, but the the roughness of the church officials, I think we forget that that's prudence.
Oh yeah, I mean it was excellently done in the film because I really loved the scene when the town officials come to the dean and they want to try to, like pin this on him. He's like, nothing to do with this. We don't acknowledge this, have a good day. And they're like, that's Sly Fox. He put it right back on us. But it's very well portrayed because I mean, this goes back to laity again. We see a priest praying after mass. He's a saint. We see different things happen like this, and we automatically assume the validity of apparitions. Like, oh, Bob Joe over there who prays the rosary every day. He said he saw the Blessed Virgin. And it's like we have this idea as the laity where we want to jump to conclusions very quickly. And no, the church is very prudent. The Even when it gets to I don't know if it was the archbishop or what exactly he was,
I
the
think he
higher
was
up
the ordinary for that
ordinary.
diocese.
Yeah, and he wants to start, due to the dean's prodding a little bit, he wants to start an investigation into this, but he also says, I'm not going to ask the emperor to open up the grotto again. I'm going to give he says, like, I'm going to give your lady a test. If this is the Blessed Mother, she will open this up. And within it's not really said how quickly it happens, but it seems within a couple days, perhaps, or a week, it gets opened up.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, the church is very prudent on all these things. It's not jumping to conclusions. It's not well, the Nova Ordo just had Divine Mercy Sunday, right? That was something that was prudently looked at the time, and it was condemned at the time.
Yes,
So
even condemned in the Novus Ordo
yeah,
until the
yeah,
Faustina cult started
until
to
until a
ramp
certain
up.
poll came along.
Yeah, and everything from Poland is good, right? So that's part of the problem there. And that this is nothing to say I love Poland for the Pol. Don't come for
I'm
us in the
Polish.
chat.
I'm Polish. So don't. Yeah.
So I have a lot of time for Poland, but I don't have a lot of time for JP2, and I don't have a lot of time for Sister Faustina and her unfortunate. I don't know her well enough or her writings well enough to call her a liar, but let's say hallucinations,
Mm.
or imaginings. Um, so
It's interesting that you should mention that because I was looking up I was doing a little search just to see historical inaccuracies in the film versus real life, and apparently the dean was not he didn't think ill of her as he did in the film as much. He in real life he actually thought she was just having hallucinations. So that was an interesting little comparison as you mentioned hallucinations there. So
hmm,
it's interesting to look when you look at these films also just to remember his what's the term artistic license versus the historical accuracies of the time. So just because we see something in the film doesn't mean it was necessarily
right.
you know like that.
As always, we want this to any time we talk about a book or a film, it should be a launching pad for you to go a little deeper into
Hmm.
it yourself. And I hope that this inspires you to do so or to put visiting St. Bernadette on your list.
Mhm.
It's not so, as I say, it's not so very far away from Paris, but it's best if you have a vehicle.
Mhm.
You can get down there by a train. It's just
Mhm.
not, we think about our itinerary as Alexander and I, we work together in a company called IHS Events. We'll put a link in the description if we remember to do that after the live stream. But when we think about planning a trip, we have to decide what makes sense to see given the time and logistics involved. And one of the big stretches we made for our France trip, it's so strange to say last year, but it feels like it was a longer time ago, was going down to Lourdes. Lourdes, that was a very big detour. It's not next to
Yeah.
Paris.
It's
It's on the
very far. It's a
other
long
side of the
train ride.
country. But what was interesting was, despite that long journey and despite us having to get up at dark 30 the next morning to
Mhm.
head back to Paris, a number of people on that trip said that that was one of their favorite moments,
Yeah.
being
It
able
was
to pray in that grotto, to make the stations, to bring home some water from the spring.
yeah. Yeah, no, it was very surreal doesn't even begin to describe it. To be there in that moment to touch the rock, to have the water coming on your hand, it was very emotional and very it's hard to encapsulate what it was. It was something else. So if anyone ever gets the chance, I mean, don't pass it up.
Yeah, and I want to have a note of caution here because people will say, "Oh, well, you're just being emotional, and faith is more than
Mhm.
that," and that's true. But grace
Mhm.
builds on nature, and
Yeah.
I've said to this to people who've heard me, it's difficult now for me when I do the Stations of the Cross not to think about being in Jerusalem. So
Mhm.
having done the stations in Jerusalem, I know the distances between the stations historically, and I've had a chance to walk them. So a lot of times that enters into my meditation. I know
Mm.
how far it is to get to the second station, etc.
Oh, that's amazing.
And
Yeah.
so grace builds on nature. So the
Yeah.
nature part of it was I've gone there and I've uploaded those memories into my brain. So I'm
Mhm.
able to use that in my devotion. So the same thing here when we're watching the film and I'm thinking I've prayed in front of that grotto with Alexander.
Yeah.
And today
Yeah.
we're going to talk about the film version of that.
Yeah.
But if you have that opportunity, don't pass that up. I think there are so many times people spend money on less important things in their lives.
Mhm.
But if they just set aside a little bit of money every year, in
Mhm.
10 years, they could go to Lourdes
Yeah.
or they could go to see Our Lady of Guadalupe as we did.
Yeah.
Don't let Alexander and I be the only people who are going to see these beautiful images and opportunity to connect in real life with just the stories we've heard. And it's not a
Yeah.
requirement, but it is nice. It's a nice addition to your life of faith, I would say.
It really is. I mean, it just, as you said, for you seeing the distance of the stations, I mean, that's a whole thing that we can't, those of us who haven't been there can't even really fathom. How far was this? How far was the first fall from the second fall, let's say? How far along? And that's a beautiful thing to think about, because when you think about carrying a heavy cross like that, the distance really plays a role in it. So,
Hmm.
yeah, and
Or the
just
distance walking, how you walk from Jerusalem to the Mount of Olives. There's decrease, and let's say it's like 200, 300 yards, but you walk down and then you walk back up,
yeah.
and walking that distance. Or there's a church called Dominus Flevit where our Lord saw and cried over Jerusalem. And to
Mm-hmm.
see there and just look and just think our Lord cried over this scene. And it's
Yeah.
obviously not the same scene as in his time, but all those things add, again, grace building on nature. If you're able to see these things and experience them, it can aid your meditation.
Mhm.
It doesn't mean that you're skipping, you're passing go and you're collecting $200. It just means that you are able to potentially enter into that scene more easily and hopefully
Mhm.
enter into a dialogue with our Lord more easily.
Mhm.
The spring is not for me. Boy, that was a shocking way to end the film. I didn't know about that. It feels like a line Saint Bernadette would have said. It
Mhm.
seems to be portrayed that way. I don't know if you looked into that, but it would seem to make sense that a victim soul like that would not be able to take advantage of the thing that she opened up for everybody else.
Mhm.
It felt
Yeah, I don't
appropriate.
I don't I don't know. It doesn't really say whether or not that was accurate or not, but yeah, I mean
I
it's
think
interesting.
the spirit of it is
Yeah,
accurate.
the spirit of it is most likely accurate there, and, you think about her life was completely, I think there was a line earlier on when the dean, after everything started to get approved, he had recollected back with her that he said that your life will not be the same ever again,
Hmm.
and once she was set on that path, once they started to inquire about it, with the ordinary, he says she's either going to be a mad woman, a liar, or the rarest of persons.
Right.
And it's a great line, and her life was just set down that path, to become a saint like that and to suffer.
Yeah,
So,
and there are two particular things that we get to harvest, and the best storytellers in general will give you something that's harvested 200 pages later, or in this
mm-hmm,
case, 2 hours later. And the two Easter eggs, sorry, not Easter eggs, the two seeds that are planted. Firstly, very early, the sister talks about the notion of suffering
mm-hmm,
and the importance of suffering, and
mm-hmm,
that for her, clearly, she had placed that at the center of her personal spirituality with our Lord.
yes,
Nothing wrong with that. But what we saw was that then became an obsession
mm-hmm,
and said, well, only if you suffer, then you can be worthy. When the idea is there's no question of worthiness, how could you possibly know? And in any case, our Lord chooses who he chooses. If
yes.
we were to have an index in an order and say, well, look, objectively speaking, you're worthier, that doesn't make any sense in the supernatural
Yeah.
order. What matters is what our Lord wishes.
Well, even the idea that if someone's suffering, that they're gonna be that's gonna be known to everyone in the community, that's so Catholic. You're supposed to not reveal if you're suffering. You're not
Mhm.
supposed to walk around grumbling that you're in agony or anything. So the very concept that anyone would even know is a false concept right
Yeah,
there.
and I would take that a little further. We're always trying to throw back lessons for the laity because that's what we're experts in being. We're not experts in being religious. The idea, if someone is battering your good name in on social media or elsewhere, leave it be. Unless
Hmm.
there's something specific in relation to preventing you from getting employment, which would harm your family. If someone wants to think poorly of you, let it be. Respond the way that our Lord would, and respond the way that these religious would. That if the sisters wanted to think poorly of her, Saint Bernadette allowed that to be. She didn't say, "Well, listen, no, you got it all wrong. Let me
Hmm.
tell you. Let me explain it to you."
Hmm.
So we don't see that, and that's why that seed provides such a rich harvest at the end of the film, where the sister realizes, a, it's wrong for her when Saint Bernadette says, "Well, I don't know why our Lord chose me. I'm sure you're actually much more worthy." She
Yeah.
says that, and then the sister realizes, actually, on top of that, Sister Mary Bernard has been suffering and has concealed it,
Yeah.
and then she becomes this advocate for her. Which
Yeah.
again, I don't know if historically that's the case,
Hmm.
but it's interesting. I have a Life of Saint Bernadette that I bought when I went to
Hmm.
Nevers, which is over
Hmm.
there, which I probably should have read before this review, but maybe it'll be an opportunity for us to do a review of that book later on. So that's
Yeah.
the first seed that's harvested is don't allow your personal obsessions to become the model for every other Christian.
Hmm.
For some people, they have a particular devotion to the seven sorrows. Others have a devotion to the Sacred Heart. It's not one devotion over another. That's the
Yeah.
nice thing. The church has all these devotions for different personalities and different
Hmm.
sensibilities and different temperaments, and they rotate. That's part of
Yeah.
why right now, we're in the season of Easter, and we have a different way of thinking about our our liturgy than we do during Lent. Right? In Lent,
Exactly.
it's purple,
Exactly.
no alleluias, and now we're in Easter and everything is bright and cheery again, and
Yeah.
we have to try to align ourselves.
And it's also, I was also say it's not about a multiplicity of devotions either. I remember early on in my life thinking, oh, holier being holier equates to I'm gonna add all the litanies now. It's gonna be adding everything. And no, it's simplicity. It's saying one litany as perfectly as you can say, and maybe rotating them up as you say seasonally. We just got out of the month of Saint Joseph, so that would be a very appropriate time to focus on the litany of Saint Joseph in devotion to
But
him.
I appreciate that. I remember being younger and being very enthusiastic and knocking out a bunch of litanies. But
Mhm,
and that goes back to what you'd said earlier on, is that when you're younger, things feel different or
mhm,
hit you differently. when you watch them. And I don't know how I would have felt about it 15 years ago, but
Mhm.
where I am now in my life, it really meant a lot. The
Yeah.
second seed that we get to harvest is the dean telling her that she's playing with fire.
Mm.
And and then that's maybe you're playing with heavenly fire. So
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
adjusts that later on. He doesn't take back what he said, but he contextualizes it because he's pushing her towards a vocation. And
Mhm.
that's something important to note. There's a multiplicity of false apparitions these days. And
Mhm.
one of the ways that I deal with them sort of off the top without even listening to the message or hearing about the different people is, have any of those people entered the religious life? Okay, well
Mhm.
then I don't believe it. The idea that you would see Our Lady in a vision and then you would just go about your lay life as if nothing happened is a
Yeah.
number one. Like all the 10 people who are still receiving visions from Medjugorje, none of them have entered the religious life. So just take away everything else and just say, oh, you've been receiving visions for all this time. That's never been precedented before. We've
Yeah.
never seen a precedent for that before with Our Lady, but suddenly you're the first and there's 10 of you. No,
Yeah.
I don't believe it. So the fact it was inevitable St. Bernadette was going to enter the religious life, but in a sense, she didn't know that. I think partly because of her simplicity. She didn't think that
Mhm.
she was quote unquote good enough to do that. That's the idea. And that's an excellent model for us, not to not embrace the religious life, but to be pliable. We never
Mhm.
see Bernadette refusing. She goes to the authorities, she answers the authorities, but when the authorities ask her to do something immoral, she refuses.
Yeah. Yeah.
When
No,
the
see,
authorities ask her to lie, she refuses.
no, it's, being pliable to God's will, never ignoring a single grace to do a single good thing, right? Like you see a homeless person and you give them maybe give them a sandwich and that builds upon it and where that's going to lead. And here she corresponded with grace and it led her to becoming a saint. It led her all the way, and that's we will likely never see an apparition of Our Lady ourselves, but we can still take that same path. If I may issue just one slight correction as we were talking about earlier, something I just noted that the person thinking she had hallucinations was actually not the priest, but the imperial prosecutor. So that was an interesting thing. Apparently, he was a very devout Catholic. He wasn't an atheist as portrayed in the
Okay.
film. So he just thought she was hallucinating.
Well, and I thought what else was interesting is we don't get a resolution of his story at the end of the film. It ends
Mm,
ambiguously. I would say
mhm,
probably positively ambiguously, if it's going to lean one way or the other on the ambiguous scale.
mhm.
But he's collapsing before the grotto in a Pascal's wager sort of manner, right? Like tried everything. I'm alone for a reason. Maybe this is where I'm supposed to be. And Bernadette, pray for me. We cut to Bernadette, but we don't get any sort of direct line of Bernadette hears this prayer and intercedes, but it's implied. I can't
Mhm.
imagine that, the story is, oh, and then Bernadette totally ignored this guy,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So
yeah.
I just wish we'd seen a resolution there. It was a very tiny flaw in a film that I considered mostly flawless. It's
Mhm.
hard. It's a very, very rarely that I come out of a movie and say, I have no objections. But this,
Mhm.
I really think, genuinely a flawless, almost flawless movie. Excellent, 10 out of 10.
Oh
I
yeah,
don't know what
absolutely.
else to say about that. And a reminder: if you have a chance to go see Saint Bernadette, please obey her wishes and don't take a photo. Just take that image in your head, take a mental photograph of it, and follow her example of simplicity and building on our very first Trad Reviews Live, The Little Way of Saint Therese. They
Yeah.
were not in the
Yeah.
same religious congregation, but they still had that similar spirit.
Indeed. Indeed.
So Alexander and I actually going to have a meeting after this stream to map out what we're going to be talking about next. So we don't have any announcements as to coming attractions, but we've always said if you have any ideas, and people have already done this, just mention in the comment section. If you're watching
Mhm.
this later on, say, hey, check out these films, etc. And as you've seen, we've been doing a mix of films that were released in the 1940s as today, and films that were released in the 2026s,
Yeah.
as we did a film that's only about a month old,
Yeah.
a few weeks ago. So that's what we'll say there. I think you can tell strong recommendations from Alexander and I
Absolutely.
for this film, and we hope that you'll check it out. There should be a link in the description of the video. It's free on YouTube. It's in the public domain, so you don't need to buy it. And I think something you can safely watch with the family and then chat about later on with the kids. I think children can get a lot from this as well, and they'll be able to share their thoughts with you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, until our next Trad Reviews Live, God bless you.
See you all. Bye.